Chapter 5, How to Stop a River, Afterlife in the Afternoon. First person, Susan. Mind drifting, eyes looking down. I didn't notice that I was in shadow until I felt goosebumps on my skin. Goosebumps! You can still get goosebumps here, I said out loud. I also noticed that less than 200 meters away, the stream ran right between two pock-marked cliffs. Pocked like big things had bashed into them. My eyes moved down to a tall logjam at the foot of the cliffs. It completely blocks my path. The big things, I say aloud. The only way through the hodgepodge of tree and branch was right at the middle of the stream. The stream rushed and funneled towards the small gaps in the logs. Just then I thought I heard a chuff chuff, old engine sound somewhere in the air beyond the jam. After reaching the jam, I study every part of it for another route. But the middle was it really. With my usual here goes shrug, I ducked and crawled and slid my feet along the wet logs, edging out further and further over the water. Higher up, I mean where I began this whole journey to the sea, the stream was shallow and familiar. Now it was beginning to remind me of the fast stream I drowned in. Then the white water was directly beneath me. The only thing keeping me dry were the scary logs I was holding onto above. Every grasp of branch or bark, I felt like the whole thing might completely pancake me. They were all balanced at different weird angles, like matchsticks spilled from their box. So I did the best thing I could, right? I froze. Come on, Susan, you're already dead, I said to myself. Yep, Susan, said I to me. Just don't want to do it again. Good one, Sue. First sign of madness, talking to yourself, said Susan back. Okay, this is it. Last jump. 1, 2, 3. I grab a branch and swing myself through, landing on the soft green grass. From the other side of the logjam, I didn't have time to enjoy being alive, because now that I'm on the other side, I can see now what was making the chuff chuff noise. What the hey, a water wheel, I exclaimed with glee. Like it was Christmas. People! I rush along the stream's edge towards it and suddenly catch sight of a rickety building behind the wheel. Well, behind and on, because the wheel partly disappeared into it. It was made of wood, but not the kind of wood that would have been practical. Rather, every kind of gathered wood, knotty wood, log wood, old planks from sailing ships, even household furniture, all chopped up and glued and wedged together. And upon its top, a windowed turret, and telescopes that pointed like out in every direction, except the end of each telescope was covered by a knitted sort of tea cozy kind of thing. I crossed a rope bridge that passed over by inches the giant wheel. Daring to look down, I see that, as well as water, the wheel scoops up all kinds of flotsam and jetsam from the stream, branches and sticks and anything loose that floats by. On the other side of the rope bridge, I find a rickety staircase to the rickety house. I climb to a little landing that has been painted in forest green, the colour now tired and faded. I'm about to knock on the knotty door when a hatch suddenly opens with a thwunk, and a rubbery and slightly moist hand pulls me inside. It takes my breath away. And any exclamation of surprise, by surprise, I was plonked down on the floor. In the middle of the room, the great wheel poked through. There wasn't a sign or a safety rail or even a sign saying, "Beware of wheel." My attention then turned to the personage standing above me. The moist hand personage. Okay, bear with me. It was a 6-foot worm with thin arms and large eyes like the bottom of drinking glasses. Why did you pull me through the door? Surprise! Exclaimed the worm, spreading its hands out. Jazz style! It's all so surprising! The next second it produced a bouquet of flowers from nowhere. Ta-da! I know how that's done, I said. The worm's face dropped. Well, if you're going to foreshadow, the worm sniffed. Who are you? I said. The worm produced a beret and a French stick, and assuming the worst French accent ever, said, Picasso. Picasso was Spanish and not a worm, I said. That's not what his ex-wives say, remarked a voice attached to a body I had not yet discovered in the rough-hewn wheelhouse. It was then that I noticed the far-from-level desk. It was stacked with leaning towers of books. Da-da-da-da. A hand suddenly pushed through the stack. They all looked perilously close to sliding off the edge and being munched up hungrily for lunch by the giant wheel. A hand suddenly pushes through the stack and beckons me closer. The stacks, compromised, fall like felled trees. Like a comical comic book flash, the bookworm slides to the end of the desk with practiced aplomb and holds them up. Cliffhanger, the worm declared. Hold the suspense, bookworm, said a gravelly female voice. I peered over the great leaning stacks, trying not to touch them. Sitting in a chair, shaped like the tail of a fantail, was a very odd-looking woman. She had hair that was the only normal thing about her. I watched her spellbound. She hadn't stopped. She didn't stop. Maybe she couldn't stop working. She had a beak for a nose and 4 arms, each with an 8-fingered hand at the end of it. She manipulated at any one time 3 pens, 6 inkpots, 14 manuscripts, and dozens of different spectacles. She would suddenly change from horn-rimmed round swatty ones to extravagant Elton John jewel-encrusted numbers. The first thing that came to mind to say to such an odd sight was, so, why a worm? Oh, him. He used to be a writer, but he got lost in his own research. Couldn't find his way out, hence bookworm, hence endless tropes. The bookworm immediately shoved the stacks back across the table. They toppled over and pinned me to the floor. The worm appeared above me, spouting visible words from his mouth. Tropes, tropes, tropes! Irony, he continued, describing a bad situation as good times. Metaphor, describing a courageous person as having the heart of a lion. Metonymy, proximity, such as referring to actions of the US President as actions of the White House. Synecdoche, referring to the whole with a part, hired hands for workers. The general with a specific, bread for food. The specific with the general, such as cat for lion, or an object with the material it is made from, such as mortar for a building. The worm finally drew breath and kept going. Sir Kenneth Burke told me personally that metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, and irony are the 4 master tropes. At the end of all this exertion showing off, the bookworm was panting and a thin stream of dribble was descending towards my face. Bucket! Behave! Retrieve girl! Said the odd bird woman in the fantail chair. The bookworm tossed the books off me and pulled me up. It then blew on me as if I were a dusty book. His breath smelt of old paper, ink, and a hint of stale glue. The spectacles? I continued, thinking a second question polite. Translative spectacles, my dear. I have 1,000 writers writing in hundreds of languages. She picked up a pair of welding goggles. These I use for Mandarin shipbuilding blueprints. And she picked up a pair of opera binoculars. Translating Verdi from the original Italian. Messy writer, muttered the worm. I looked around the dark wooden interior. There were bookcases. They weren't bookcases, not normal bookcases, but long poles with books hanging by hooks or shoelaces, like the way people toss a pair of shoes over power lines. My eyes settled back on the woman and I said, I know who you are. The bookworm's face sprung into Susan's line of vision. Hang on. Did I just do third person? That's weird of her. Damn, did it again. The bookworm sneered at me. Wait till the denouement to reveal that. I stepped to the left out of his way. And I know what this place is. Picture the big bookworm's face really annoyingly close again. Perfect timing, it said. before racing over to an old phonograph and placing a record on the turntable. He cranked it round and round, and Wagner poured dramatically from the speaker cone. "Too much?" asked the worm, twisting its rubbery neck around. "Can you make him stop?" I said. "Oh, you don't want it stopping," said the woman with 4 arms. "Better out than in." She leaned across the table, her 2 eyes enormous in the diving goggles she was wearing. In the diving goggles she was wearing. "He gets inside your head like a submarine." I pointed at the goggles knowingly. "Just a wild guess. Jules Verne?" "Oh, he's around every day," said the worm. "He's around every day," said the worm. "No appointment, just like you. Except he's important, which means you're not." "You're the fantail, aren't you?" I said to the woman. The woman with 4 arms and 8 fingers on each hand winked at me. All her 1,000 wrinkles just faded. She made face after face, and each time she lifted a lip or scrunched her eyes, she looked like 100 different women from 100 different lands. "And this place is," I began. "Where all the best dead writers get published," said the woman. "Well, there's a rival company, but, not here," muttered the worm in a shifty wink-wink, nudge-nudge sort of manner. A huge steam whistle sounded, and the wheel shook to a grinding halt. The fantail woman shouted, "Trolley!" Bookworm ran to the deepest corner. He plunged it back into the light, pushing a huge train trolley onto a spot on the floor with a rough hand-painted target. He quickly grabbed a large lever, then glanced back at the fantail woman and pulled. The wheel was released again. Books began to shoot from its spinning buckets. They flew through the air, their ink still wet. Bookworm was now positioned by the wheel, waving an ancient blowtorch at them. He dried the books in the air as they flew, just before they landed neatly stacked in the trolley. The fantail woman hit a bell on her desk, ding, and yelled, "Done!" The wheel and the books had stopped. Bookworm grabbed a towel, put 2 glasses on the table and poured out 2 glasses of treacle-like liquor. He looked across to Susan, then glanced at the woman behind the desk. "Too young," said Fantail. She took off her spectacles and side-kicked a wheelie chair out from the desk. It hit the wall, spun and bounced back to hit Susan in the back of the knees. She plonked down, I mean me. I did, because it's just happened. "We need to talk," said Worm as he held the back of my chair. "First, why do I go in and out of first-person narrator in this place?" I asked. "It happens," shrugged the woman. "It's just like when you switch on the radio and it's not quite on the station. Don't worry about it. So, I am the bird, or was when you met me. My name is Professor Fantail. Which originally just Fantail, but the writers seem to like titles, even the ones that denounce the establishment." "May I say ironic hypocrisy, please?" stammered the bookworm. "No, you may not," replied Professor Fantail sternly. Bookworm shoved the spine of a book close to Susan's eyes. There was a small logo of a fantail on it. Fantail Books, the only decent publishing company for the dead. You want to get a new work published after you're dead? You come here. Well, if you can make it up the stream. I began. The bookworm slammed a fist down on the desk, then tilted a desk lamp and shone it into my eyes. "We know what you want, but you can't have it." "Then why am I?" "We ask the questions." "Well, then ask." "Well, I really haven't got a real question," mumbled the bookworm. His eyes widened in hopefulness. "Would you like to hear the 8 rhetorical modes?" "Maybe later," I replied quickly. "Why do you need to have the living read your work?" said Professor Fantail. She had waited patiently, her eyes closed, whenever the worm had spouted its mad, unravelling rants. "I died before anyone could read anything. Only my parents had read my short stories. One about Captain Cook, that was a school project, and one about a pirate. Of course, they loved them all," finished Professor Fantail. "You have to impress the dead first," declared Bookworm. She has, returned Professor Van Taylor. Dickens read your story about the one-eyed cat that saved the, unicorns, finished Susan, the name Dickens ringing in her ears, in my ears, that is. He gave it the thumbs up, the double thumbs up, added Professor Van Taylor. The bookworm's face lit up as he wheezed. Double! Cover his mouth! Yelled Van Taylor, but it was too late. The Latin pollici verso was used in the context of a hand gesture used by ancient Romans crowds to pass judgment on a defeated gladiator. It is assumed that the thumbs down was the signal that a defeated gladiator. 2 minutes later, so, in conclusion, a closed fist with a wrap-round thumb means life. The worm held his pose like an old actor, milking applause. Are you finished? I asked. I turned to Professor Van Taylor, still switching glasses as if by force of habit. Well, if Charles Dickens likes my work, that's pretty cool. Cool, repeated Professor Van Taylor. It was actually Charlie's idea that just as in his story A Christmas Carol, you might return like a ghost to influence the living. I've gone back once already. The riot, Demi's camera, except he didn't recognise me. Ebenezer Scrooge recognised the ghost in his story. Can't you see me back as me, as a 15-year-old me? No, my dear, said Professor Van Taylor. You can never appear as you did, never be recognised. Well, unless you haunt them. But if you can live with these conditions, which will not always be pleasant, you will be able to write about everything that happens. And we can print it here, and it will... Professor Van Taylor took off the diamond-encrusted 1960s spectacles she was wearing and looked at the bookworm. What will it, worm? The bookworm squirmed. Professor, the crux. How do we get a solid copy to the other side? Professor Van Taylor nodded. Precisely. Well, you see, we won't actually know anything until we exactly know, said the bookworm. You've never done this before, have you? I said, both hands on my hips. No idea how to do it, none whatsoever, not a clue, confessed Professor Van Taylor. Well, we're still getting approval, mumbled Bookworm. You see, Susan, we mostly, completely, interjected Bookworm, publish books from dead authors about dead people, said the worm, getting the last word. Boris Pasternak did a lovely graphic novel on General George Custer. Lots of exclamation marks. Kapow! But then why suggest it? Why can't I just write about dead people too? I could just hang out with Virginia Woolf and Charles Dickens. Why give me hope and then... I slumped on a chair and sighed so heavily, papers littering the rough planks scattered. You, whispered Professor Van Taylor, must write about the living. Why? I grunted, staring at the hole in the floor. Because, began Professor Van Taylor, like she was about to reveal the ending of an as yet unpublished novel, because the bookworm couldn't keep still and started a dramatic leap. Professor Van Taylor, you can't! I can't tell you, my dear. Just trust me. The living need you. The bookworm's dramatic leap fell short. I can't promise it won't be painful at times, and there is risk. Risk, I said, looking back up. It's very rare, but spirits get stuck. Ghosts, you call them. Normally they get stuck on the other side of the wall, said Professor Van Taylor. But you're going back through the wall. Behind me is a mirror. Can you see the wall in the mill? Can you see the wall of the mill behind you, reflected in it? I stood and looked at the mirror behind the professor. Standing upright, she was barely 5 feet tall. I see it, I said. Looks just the same. Susan, I promise you this. Before you reach the end of the river, Bookworm and I will have discovered a way to get your book back to the living world. A promise, I heard Bookworm say. Then Susan Mary MacLeod slowly turned and the light in the book mill changed. Like a slow fade in a movie theatre. The wooden wall behind the great wheel appeared to her like a silver screen of a cinema. Danny's image appeared on the screen. She watched him as if it was a home movie. Danny at school, Danny from the rock face, Danny in a dark room, and then Danny, the last human face she had seen. The movie screen darkened. The face was now lying on a bench in the rain. Susan felt something on her hands and looked down. They were inside worn mittens. Her feet felt heavier. They were now snugly inside mud-splattered Ugg boots. And what she felt over her shoulders was a dirty white sheet. Susan sniffed and screwed up her nose. She saw Bookworm doing the same. "It's me," she said. "I smell." She turned her wrinkled fingers over. "And why do I have to be so old?" she said as she turned in the rays of projected light. She knew what she had to do, so she walked through the wall into someone else's movie.